Federal party leaders are crossing the country trying to win votes in this election campaign, but issues are different for voters depending, in some instances, on what part of the country you're in. So on this first day of the election campaign, it is most certainly time for a Premier's League. Let's hear from those who ran the provinces where many of these issues were and remain top of mind. In Saskatoon, Roy Romanow, Premier of Saskatchewan from 1991 to 2001, now Senior Policy Fellow in Political Studies at the University of Saskatchewan. Christy Clark was BC's Premier from 2011 to 2017. She's now Senior Advisor with Bennett Jones and joins us from Chicago. And Bob Rae was Premier of Ontario from 1990 to 95. He also served as former interim leader of the Federal Liberal Party. He's now a senior partner at the law firm OKT and joins us from Toronto. Hello to all three of you. It's such a pleasure to welcome you to the show on this first official day of the campaign. I want to start off about asking about the issues, and particularly what you feel in the provinces you've represented is the top issue, top of mind for voters as they head to the polls. Mr. Romanow, I'll start with you.
Well, I would say the number one issue is energy, namely how do we get the energy products of Saskatchewan, Western Canada to market, pipelines, in other words. Then, of course, there is the related issue, and that is the environment, which relates to the pipelines as well, and how to control that. I think that combined is one. And then I would say as a second major issue is the issue of agriculture and Huawei and the Huawei impact. All of these factors in some way or other, I think, are impacting in a negative way the economic and social, and therefore affecting the political impact on Western Canada.
And who do you think, Mr. Romanow, how do you think, I guess, that reflects on some of the main contenders, namely the Conservatives and the Liberals?
Well, that's a very tough question because if you're looking at it objectively, one would say that there is another dimension to this argument apart from the Canadian actors, and that is the Chinese approach. But my guess is right now the primary difficulties would be on the shoulders of the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. I'm not saying that to be a fair assessment, but that I think is the perception here. And so I think in that regard there'll be a bit of an uphill battle for the Liberals on those issues, going right into Alberta and into BC.
Ms. Clark, speaking of BC, what do you think is top of mind for voters there right now, obviously with the caveat that that can change over the next 6 weeks?
Well, I think what should be top of mind is the economy. And, as Mr. Romanow said, the thing about the economy for us, and I think for all of Canada, is lack of access to Asia because pipelines, this government hasn't succeeded in getting any pipelines built. I mean, we are losing about $20 to $30 a barrel by shipping our oil down to the States and supporting low gas prices for American consumers and jobs for American workers. We should keep that in Canada. The second thing I would say is people will, I think, focus a lot on international relations. So I think what we'll see, and we should see, is a lot of talk about can the next government, or will they be able to chart a course to some sort of détente with the American government and get some trade deals done. Second, how are they going to fix the poisonous relationship that Roy referred to with China, which is a hugely important trading partner for us, and the debacle in India? How do we overcome that as a country? It's a huge market, especially potentially for our gas, but also for our agricultural products. And I would say the third thing is climate change, and that is going to be pivotal in British Columbia in particular. The Greens are showing enormous strength in BC, and if the Liberals lose that Green vote, it could have devastating impacts on. And the fact is, on the climate change strategy, the Conservatives have no plan. The Liberals have a weak, but at least a plan. And the Greens have kind of a wacky plan. So hard to say who that's going to benefit at the end of the day, but I do think that voters are going to really, especially in Vancouver, on Vancouver Island, prioritize some of those climate issues.
Just a quick follow-up on that. What do you think of the Greens' realistic chances?
I think they could take 10 seats, perhaps, across the country. I think that they could really do well. I think what the Liberals are going to try and do is say, look, we know you don't like Justin as much as you once did, but you can't vote for the Conservatives because if they get elected, there will be no one to stand up on climate change. So their whole strategy is to try and grab every NDP vote, to try and grab every Green vote, to try and put themselves in a position for a majority. I mean, maybe they'll do it. It'll have to be nasty. It's going to be ugly if they want to get there on that front. But I do think the Greens have a realistic chance of some significant gains and perhaps holding the Liberals to a minority position in this election.
Mr. Ray, your thoughts on what people in Ontario are thinking about right now as they consider this campaign and eventually in 6 weeks head to the polls?
I think, like everywhere else, I think the economy is a top of mind issue. I think climate change is an increasingly important issue for people. And I also think there's another issue out there. It's about the sort of the emotional context of campaigning and of elections. How do people feel about it? We always talk about the issues, but the reality is that when people are voting, they're voting as to who do they like? Do they like Mr. Trudeau? Do they like Mr. Scheer? Do they like the other leaders? That becomes a question. And it also touches on, I think, a theme which I think Mr. Trudeau is going to hit on quite strongly, and certainly his campaign will, and that is, look, we have a progressive, forward-looking government that is doing its best in a difficult world. Do you really want a Brexit-style government? Do you really want a Trump-style government? Don't you want to break away from some of this divisiveness and have a more positive kind of government? And I actually think that as kind of nebulous as that might sound, I actually think it's something which gives the Liberals reason to think that there are some New Democrats and some Greens who, at the end of the day, might well come their way.
Mr. Romano, let me ask you, as the three of you are part of a very small circle in this country who know what it's like to run for the leadership of a province in your cases and a country in the case of the 6 people who are running right now, what is going on, I guess, in the minds of those leaders? Talk a bit about, if you could, the challenges that face them over the next 6 weeks and what it's like that many of us, what it's like personally that many of us don't know about.
Well, for me, my recollection on a small province, of course, it must be more difficult at a national level, was always preparing yourself for the day. And the days are not short, they go into the evenings. That is preparing in terms of the issues, the kinds of descriptions which have been given by my 2 colleagues. You want to be able to be fully informed. You have to have the physical strength of campaigning. You want to make sure that there are no gaffes and misstatements which are inevitable in any election campaign. So at least speaking for myself, I found myself going into my election campaigns with a degree of anxiety because so much depends upon performing well all the time, given especially the scrutiny of the media and the journalists, which is an appropriate one. But I think as well, one last point before I turn it over to my colleagues, I think it is always as well the unknowable, the incident or the affair or the statement that is made by somebody, whether it's a candidate or whether it's from another country, say China or whatever, in the midst of the campaign, which throws you off your game plan. And that is I think the biggest worry.
Ms. Clark, same question to you.
I would give 3 pieces of advice, I think. The first one would be to remember that the whole campaign rests on your shoulders as the leader. It's a lot of stress for sure, and Roy talked a little bit about that. I think you've got to remember, as the leader, if you make a mistake, your whole party and perhaps the country, in your view, is going to pay for that. The second thing is, be authentic. It is so hard to get off the bus or the plane every day and deal with the same questions or all these aggressive people in the media.
You can say it, reporters.
Which is your job. And to stay authentic, to stay who you are. And the third thing I would say is have fun, or at least look like you're having fun despite the anxiety. It's the greatest thing you'll ever get to do in your life. It's the reason you got into politics, because you love people, you love making the country better, you care about the decisions that you make. And if you can't enjoy a campaign, and you can't appear to be enjoying a campaign, I don't think you should be in politics.
Mr. Ray, you're one of the few who's led the party at the federal level and a party at the provincial level. What reflection can you provide us about what's going on for people in that position right now?
I think I agree with everything that Christian and Roy have said. I think you have to have a sense of humor. You have to understand that this is not about being perfect. The campaign will never be perfect. You're not perfect. Just learn to live with it, go with it, and learn how to laugh. Tell some jokes, have as much fun as you can without making a complete fool of yourself. But that's really important because, yeah, of course there's anxiety, but you got to get over that very quickly. You really have to just get into the experience and enjoy it. You need to be in physical shape, you need to be in mental shape to do it. But don't put an incredible amount of pressure on yourself. Just remember all the other people are experiencing the same thing. And I think the public is ready for somebody who's refreshing and who's honest and candid with people and who says what he or she is really thinking and feeling and not just repeating lines. I mean, it's so robotic sometimes, and there's so much repetition of message and all that stuff that people are trained to do by all the handlers who are all around them. Just tell them all to take a break and just be yourself. And I think that is what helped Mr. Trudeau to win in 2015. And I think the fact that he does like campaigning and he does like people, I think comes across because that's who he is. It's not somebody else. And I think that makes a big difference.
Well, I appreciate
Could I just make
one last point, Mr. Ronan, and I got to go,
a very, very brief interjection. I want to support Bob. Sometimes there's a genuineness that comes across, well, almost always, if you get caught in the kind of circumstance that he describes. I was caught that way as a leader. All of a sudden a question comes out of nowhere, you're not prepared, and you sort of say to the voters, I don't know, but I'm going to dig up the answer. They like that rather than some sort of a made-up answer. I'm not quite sure I'm speaking to Bob's point, but I'm trying to communicate that enjoyment dimension to it.
All right, I really want to thank all three of you for your time and for your insights this evening. Hope to see you again during the campaign very shortly. Thanks so much to Roy Romano, Christy Clark, and Bob Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Kapellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.